The Nanjing Massacre was a sorrowful event that affected many people. An estimated number of 300,000 civilians were killed. My name is Renee, and today my group and I will communicate our ideas on the Nanjing Massacre and our response to it. The Nanjing Memorial currently expresses anger and resentment towards the Japanese public. The theme of the main museum is to reveal evidence to the public. In the main museum, propaganda is used to tell the narrative. However, we believe that there needs to be a building that educates the public about forgiveness and dehumanization by going through the 8 steps of genocide. Our group has designed an annex building that educates the public about issues revolving around the Nanjing Massacre. Our building incorporates wavy lines and water to represent education that raises awareness to help prevent events like the Nanjing Massacre from happening again. Our main obligation is for the audience to understand that genocide and massacres can occur in the 21st century, and we must prevent it. From above, the garden looks like waves crashing on the shore. Waves are a powerful symbol in many cultures and philosophies. There is an iconic wave called the Kanganawa wave in Japanese culture. The painting has a large, powerful wave that is overtaking a small boat. The artist Hokusai cleverly played with perspective to make Japan's grandest mountain appear as a small triangular mound with a hollow of the cresting wave. Regarding to this painting, the great wave symbolizes education and the mountain represents the Nanjing Massacre narrative. Even though the narrative is the big idea behind this project, education is actually the most important part. Ocean waves are considered one of the most powerful phenomena in the world. They affect and impact coastlines and things such as glass. A single shard of glass starts out with rough edges, easy enough to cut through skin. However, as time passes, the ocean turns the pointy object into a different smooth complexion. Just like waves, education has the power to shape and change a person's ideals and thoughts. Here we used lotus flowers. The lotus flower symbolizes being pure in one's spirit. The flower produces beautiful petals even if it grew in the dirtiest waters. The growth symbolizes purity of the heart and the mind, and rising out of grief to start a new beginning. We incorporated the idea of purity and rising up from grief in response to the Nanjing Massacre. We also planted white flowers to symbolize loyalty and worthiness. In Japanese culture, these virtues are highly valued in Bushido. Bushido, meaning the way of the warrior, is the code of conduct of the samurai. During the mid-19th century, the focus of the samurai was loyalty and sacrifice. Bushido teaches and guides men according to a moral standard. The difference between good and bad and between right and wrong are givens, not arguments, subject to discussion or justification, and a man should know the difference. It's important for the audience to understand the moral and ethics of the Nanjing Massacre to help prevent events like this. We used the Kanganawa wave at the top of our building here, and then we also used the wavy patterns in our windows on the side. We incorporated water that represents religious rituals in Buddhism and Christianity. Water is used in these religions during times of mourning and rite of passages. In Christianity, water can be used to purify and remove sins. This occurs during baptism. We incorporated water into our design to represent the cleansing of sins that happened during the Nanjing Massacre. In other words, to forgive but not to forget what happened. Now my colleague will continue explaining our design.
Aspect when designing it. Okay, science is an important aspect when designing a museum, especially heat transfer. To understand heat conduction and radiation are. Conduction is the transfer of heat through direct contact, where molecules collide. Convection happens when cooler liquids or gases exchange places with their warmer counterparts. where the warm ones rise and the cool ones fall. Radiation is the only form of heat transfer that doesn't require matter. It transfers heat through thermal radiation, or of course you can say energy, or photons. COP21 is the global summit of talks held of climate change and talks held in different cities around the world, this year in Paris. A summary of what agreements were achieved this year mainly revolved around reducing the amount of greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere. To achieve this, my group must be conservative about heat management. In the average building, heat is mainly lost through the windows and the roof, and of course, some through the walls. To prevent the heat loss through windows, two methods called double glazing and thermal break can be applied. Double glazing creates a vacuum between two layers of glass panels. By successfully eliminating matter and creating space where no matter exists, we can successfully prevent conduction and convection, the two most common ways of heat transfer. Thermal break is a recently developed technology that uses the properties of aluminum to create a sort of blockade against any sort of heat transfer. Aluminum creates a sort of they are thin, large sheets of aluminum that are applied to a portion of the window that are resistant to both to conduction and radiation. Both solutions can last up to 20 years. Heat loss through walls and the roof can be minimized through a process called cavity wall insulation, where it involves inserting insulating material between two walls to prevent as much heat loss as possible. This solution is cheap, energy efficient, and can last through 20 years. By reducing the amount of heat loss and the need for generating energy and heat, less greenhouse gases will be produced, leading to a better place for all of us.
Hi, my name is Elsie, and we will now transition into the interior of the museum. The exterior building structure is taken out, so now you can see the ground floor of the building shown here. Before I start talking about the specific components of the interior, I would like to reiterate the main purpose of our museum: education, to raise awareness and to prevent something like the Nanjing massacre from happening again in the future. Education is represented through waves throughout the entire annex building, because waves, like education, are powerful and can shape things. The Kanganawa wave also has a lot of significance in Japanese culture. At the same time, we were keeping in mind the tragedy that took place in this location. 300,000 people have died just a few generations ago, and we have observed the palpable anger and sadness of the Chinese population during our trip to the existing Nanjing Memorial Hall. The photo frames of the interior were shaped with the purpose education in mind. The ground floor of the interior is divided into two parts. The section on the right is the entrance section, when people first walk into the inside of our annex building. From there, the museum goers would spiral up to the top of the building and right down to the exit section on the ground floor, which is on the left. The entrance part of the interior focuses on raising awareness of the unique artistic choices of the museum. For example, this photo frame is about the choice of materials and colors in our memorial. Colors are usually dark and gloomy because this is a very sad event. The materials were chosen carefully to adhere to the COP21 requirements. The exit part is all about raising awareness of the actual event and educating. That is why this photo frame explains why the Nanjing massacre happened, this one right over here, and this photo frame talks about why it matters. It is important that our annex building talks about the why, because knowing why gets rid of ignorance, and horrible history will not be repeated. As humans, we are progressive beings, and we can learn from our past mistakes. Other components of the interior include benches over here, and the murals over here. The benches and murals go back to the main depiction of our theme, waves, which is the main focus of the exterior. Including the benches and waves in the interior is our way of hinting the theme of education and the power of the wave all throughout our museum. The colors of the bench, dark and light shades of green and blue, along with the wavy lines, shown here, will remind the museum goers of the overarching theme. Same goes for the murals, which were created with a similar color palette.
I'm the fourth and last speaker. I am Kevin, and I'll be talking about 4 different things. One, the physical design of the interior building. 2, the color choices. 3, human rights. And 4, the underlying purpose. So let's begin. The physical design of the interior building. Why did we exactly choose this design? For example, rights on the middle of the screen. You can see right here. There's 2 center cones, each having a ramp inside to lead up and down from the 2nd floor. And I had this museum split into 2 parts, the entrance and the exit. Therefore, the audience can get a more, directed view of what exactly this museum is trying to present. And now, moving on to the color choices. The color choices we have are great, since that this is not a very bright subject to be talked about, so we decided not to use too much bright colors inside our museum, since that would be seeming as insensitive and disrespectful. But our floors, however, are made of glass, and under there are water, which reinforces our idea of the way again. And also, our third point, the human rights, the involvement of human rights in our museum. How does this museum relate to human rights? Because our main focus is education, and however, we believe that that education is part of human rights, that everyone deserves to be educated, to receive the right education, to allow them to think for themselves. The main memorial does not really reinforce that idea, since in the main memorial, most of it is all about mostly propaganda and to hate the Japanese, which is not the message we want to bring to the people. And finally, number 4, the underlying purpose. Our theme, a recurring theme, the wave. The wave can represent many things, but our representation of the waves is, again, education. Because since the wave can shape sand and landforms, we believe education can shape minds. Shape the minds of the individual to teach them to think for themselves, and not blindly absorb everything thrown at them. Thank you. And thank you for listening to our speech, and hope you have a wonderful day.